Let's play around with some files. Yesterday I created this registration HTML file and I used CSS and JavaScript. The CSS was an external file which I created a new folder today called box, and it was called mystyle.css. I had JavaScript in this, was not externalized, it was in the registration.html file itself. Well, I took all of these files, I copied registration. We've got engineering and bingo that has the same code in it. We are pointing to the CSS and the JavaScript. Instead of having it directly in the file itself, we're pointing to it. So if you look at registration here, here's the head, here's the title, here's the meta charset UTF-8, here's the meta name equals viewport, here's the link that points to a bitmap image. So if I open this, you can see these little smileys up here next to the title. There's a smiley registration, smiley engineering, smiley bingo. That's my little image, and this is how you connect it. Link, rel equals shortcut icon, href equals, then you have to put the path. I have a folder called box. Inside of the folder called box I have smile.bitmap. Type equals image /x icon, and then close that up. If you open up this box, you can see, there it is, smile.bmp. Okay, this link right here points to the style sheet. Again, it's inside a folder called box, and it's called mystyle.css. Again, if I open up box, you can see mystyle.css. And further down, I have externalized the JavaScript. Script language equals JavaScript, source equals, again, the folder box, and the file is called action.js, and right here is action.js. All I did to create the externalized JavaScript was take everything inside of the script tags, not the script tag, but everything inside. So I highlighted all of this stuff, omitting the opening script tag, and go all the way down until you see the closing script tag. Pretty soon. Okay, all of this I copied and pasted. I double-clicked in my Notepad++, and I pasted all that information. No, not all this information. All of the script. Like that. And then I named it File, Save As, and in Box, I named it Action.js. So if I just double-click on this, it'll just replace it. So now I have a JavaScript file, an external JavaScript file. So I can just delete all of the JavaScript that is in registration.html, engineering.html, and bingo.html. Each of these files are the exact same code, and they're pointing to the exact same CSS, bitmap, image of the smiley face, and the JavaScript, the style, and the smiley. So we can get rid of the script tags in the head. So now the only thing we have in the head is head, title, this meta charset, this meta name, this link to the smile image, this link to the mystyle CSS, and the link to the action JavaScript. It makes our HTML code smaller. I'm going to do the same thing to engineering. Okay, everything is exactly the same. So let's get rid of all of the script, because now it's getting all of the script from an external sheet. All these functions. All right. Get rid of all of it. And last but not least, this bingo file. Oops. All right. It's a lot of code to take out of a file. Instead of having all this code written 3 times in 3 different files, write it once in one file and just point to it from each of these 3 files. We go back out of that box. We've got Bingo HTML, Engineering HTML, Registration HTML. Each of these separate files are pointing to the box and then pointing to the action.js, mystyle.css, smile.bmp. This thing called Strange Note is just as I go along doing code, if I find anything different, any little comments that I want to realize to myself, I put it in there. This has nothing to do with the web page's interaction at all. Okay, so let's test these pages. Let me just close out of this. I'm going to close out of this so you can watch me physically open them up in Notepad++. I can close the action JavaScript. I just want to open Bingo, run, launch in Firefox, Engineering, run, launch in Firefox, and Registration, run, launch in Firefox. Okay, so we got Bingo, Engineering, Registration, all the same code pointing to all the same external files. Let's go to the Bingo one first. Let's put something in here. Joe Blow, roll number 1, math, register. Now let's go to engineering. Sam Silk 2, change this to physics, register in engineering. Let's go to the registration page. Betty Boop, roll number 3, chemistry, register. Now you've noticed that I've used my code in 3 different pages. I'm going to close out of all 3 different pages. I'm going to open them up again. Bingo, run, launch in Firefox. Here's your Betty Boop. Engineering, run in Firefox. Betty Boop. Registration, run, launch in Firefox. Betty Boop. What happened to the other? What happened to Joe Blow and the other one that I did? Well, what we've got going on here is the last thing that you do, no matter what page you do it, in what order, the last thing that gets done gets synced with the other ones. All right, I'm on registration now. Let me add somebody else. Let me add Tom Thumb. 1, 2, 3 is the roll number, physics, register. So in the registration page, we have Betty Boop and Tom Thumb. If I go to engineering and just hit the refresh button, it syncs. If I go to Bingo and hit the refresh, it syncs also. I kind of thought when I closed out of all 3 of these pages and opened them up that all 3 different things that were put in would be in all 3, but as it stands, the only way we were able to sync all of them is by going to each of these pages and hit the refresh button. By closing out before we refreshed each of them, we only got the last registration. So this is kind of interesting to understand how files using local storage, if they have the exact same element names, the exact same element IDs, and if they're following the exact same code, you can have 3 different files and they can sync each other. But how? Again, I thought that if I did each one of these differently, shut them all down and then open them all, that I'd have 3 different things in all 3 pages. That part didn't work, but doing it this way does work. Let me go to Bingo and let me just put in Bingo, since that's the page I'm doing this on. Bingo, Bingo. Roll number 99, math, English, register. Now I'm just going to hit refresh on this page, just on this one, not the other 2. When I go to engineering, I've got these things. So let me try out engineering. because that's the page I'm dealing with. Engineering, roll number 55, subject, English, register. So now you've got Betty Tom Bingo. In the engineering, we have Betty Tom Engineering. I'm going to refresh only this page. Now let me go to registration. Let me type in the name of this page, registration, 88, and psychology, register. I'm going to refresh this page only. So we got bingo with Betty Tom Bingo, engineering with Betty Tom Engineering, registration with Betty Tom Registration. Let's close out of all of these 3 pages and open them up again and see what we get. Bingo, launch in Firefox. Look at that, Betty Tom Registration. Again, it only saved the last thing that I did as far as this last pass of the testing process. If I go back here and run engineering, Betty Tom Registration. And of course, you know what's going to happen if I do the same thing with registration. Betty Tom Registration. So now they've synced again. What if I want each of these pages to not do that? Let's say each of these pages belongs to a different employee. There's an employee in charge of this department, an employee in charge of this department, an employee in charge of this department. I don't want departments to change other departments' information. So there's a time when you want your information to sync and a time when you don't want it to sync. So let me go out of here, and I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to just see. If I change my path, the bingo engineering and registration, to be in its own folder, let me see if that makes a difference or not. I'm going to call this the bingo folder, and I'm going to put the bingo HTML file in the bingo folder. I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call that the engineering folder. And I'm going to put the engineering HTML webpage in it. And I'm going to have a third folder for registration. And I'm going to put the registration webpage in there. Now, because I have all of these files in their own folder, we have some changes that we need to make as far as pointing to the CSS, JavaScript, and smiley image that's in Box. Changes everything. And if you don't believe me, I can go back here and click refresh. Look, file not found. File not found. File not found. Because I put them somewhere and the browser is looking for them where they originally were. So let me open up the bingo folder. Let me double click on bingo.html. Now you see what the file looks like when it is not properly pointing to the Box folder that has the CSS style sheet. Furthermore, you see something that was saved that we didn't actually see previously. And I'm going to try to save some junk here, just some garbage and anything. Register. See, so it's not even accessing the JavaScript. It's not doing anything. Clear's not doing anything. Register's not doing anything. None of these buttons are working because they're not pointing to my functions. So in my CRUD folder, I've got a bingo folder. Open it up. I have bingo.html. Let me right click, edit with Notepad++. Let's get rid of all of this stuff, because now that we've moved stuff around, we need to get out of here. Let me close up this. All right. Fresh path. Edit with Notepad++. This bingo.html webpage has to jump out of the bingo folder and go into the box. So let's change our path. Let's see, we got our HTML, our head, title. Here we go. We have to jump out of the bingo folder. You do that with a // and then the rest of the path is right, box/smile bitmap. So let's save that, and let's go back in here in the bingo folder, double click bingo.html. We should at least see the smiley face, which we do, because now we've created a path that correctly points to the that smiley face that's in box. The next step we have to do is we have to change the path to the CSS style sheet. So down here, for the link that points to the CSS, we have to do the same thing, .. So we're jumping out of the bingo folder and into the box, looking for mystyle.css. So let's refresh that. Let's refresh the page. Voila! Now my style sheet is being accessed. Last but not least, we have to do the same thing for our external JavaScript. So .. refresh the page and refresh. So now we have bingo with a fresh slate. Let's type in bingo, bingo, number 1, math, register. All right, let's close it and let's click it again and make sure that local storage is working. So yes, so for the bingo page, we've saved a row that says bingo 1 math. Let's close out of this. Let's go back into the CRUD folder. Let's go into the engineering. Let's click on engineering and see if it syncs the bingo row. Again, we're not pointing correctly. Let me get out of this. We're not pointing correctly to anything, so we have this plain white page. So we have to right click our engineering. Let's open it up with Notepad++, and let's do the same changes that we did. Let's point correctly to the smile image. Let's point correctly to the style sheet. And let's point correctly to the JavaScript. Now it's pointing correctly. So now when I refresh engineering, we now see the style sheet. Let's try to add something to the engineering. Engineering, roll number 1, math, register. Okay, when you refresh the page, you still see engineering. Close out of it, double click it again, you still see engineering. All right, let's go back out. Let's back out of the engineering folder to the CRUD folder and do the same thing for registration. So double click the registration. Let's close these up so we don't get confused with so many files open. Let's right click registration, edit with Notepad++, and fix our paths. So .. for the smile bitmap, .. for the mystyle.css style sheet, .. for the action JavaScript. Okay, let's double click registration HTML, and now you can see the style sheet is working. Let's write registration, roll number 1, math, register. Okay, refresh it, close out of it, click it again. So the registration page has saved a single item. If I close out of this, what I want to see is that we are no longer syncing, so that if I make a change in one page, it won't make a change in all the pages, even though they're accessing the exact same action, JavaScript, style, CSS, smile, BMP. They're accessing all of them. The key is that we put each web page in its own folder. So if I go to bingo, right click, edit Notepad++, go back to CRUD, go into engineering, right click, edit with Notepad++, go back to CRUD, go into registration, right click, edit with Notepad++. Close this up. Bingo, run in Firefox. Engineering, run in Firefox. Registration, run in Firefox. Okay, let me close this up a little bit so we can have a little more room with our browser. Bingo, we've saved right here. Nothing but bingo in the bingo page. Engineering, nothing but engineering in the engineering page. Registration, nothing but registration in the registration page. Let's make some changes. To the bingo, let's add bingo 2. This will be our second table row. And just bingo 2, any kind of random number. We can change our subject, and let's hit register. Let's do the same thing for engineering. Same thing for the registration page. All right, so for each page now we have 2 columns that only have to do with what we added when we were in this page. Let's synchronize every page by opening it and hitting the refresh button. Let's close every page. And let's open every page again. Actually, I'll even go out of Notepad++. Go into the CRUD. Go into the bingo, double-click bingo.html, and as you can see, it still has only the exclusive information that you put in when you were in this page. It did not synchronize anything from the other folders. Go back to CRUD, let's go into the engineering folder, let's double-click that one, and as you can see, we only have that information. Last but not least, in the registration folder, only the information created on that page. So what I've showed you is that if you want to keep information, if you want various web pages to share a style sheet, a JavaScript, maybe a shortcut icon, and so on and so forth, you can put that information in a box. But when you're using local storage, if we had these pages outside of their own individual folders, we would see some syncing going on, and you may very well want the ability to sync. If you don't want the ability to sync and you want this information to only stay on this page and not jump into another page and alter everybody's pages, then just put them in their own folder. That way you change the path enough that it does not, I guess, sync or cross-contaminate each of these individual files information using local storage. Again, I'll show you how we started off. I'll go in the bingo folder and I'll drag this out. I will cut it out of there and put it right here. I'll do the same thing with the engineering web page. I'll cut it out of its own folder and I'll stick it right next to the other one. And last but not least, let's grab the registration HTML, cut it out of its own folder, and just sit it next to the other ones. So now they don't have their own unique hiding places, if you will. Now they're open to syncing. So now, if I refresh all of these pages, because I changed the location, we get the file not found error message, so I can close out of these. Let's just double-click bingo. Let's double-click engineering. Let's double-click registration. Of course, we know what our problem is. It's not properly pointing to this information inside of the box folder, so we have to make those changes again. So I'll just highlight all of these, right-click, edit with Notepad++. Let's change our path again so that we can point to those things. Now we're not jumping out of individualized folders. We just want to jump into box. So because we just want to jump into box, we don't need this // We can go back to the way it was before. Simply box /mystyle.css, box /action.js, and box /smile.bmp. Now, because they're all next to each other, they're not in their own hiding folder, we should have a sync problem. Well, it depends, a problem or a solution. It depends on what you need to do. Okay, so I fixed the registration, but I didn't fix the other two. So let's fix engineering. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. And get rid of that. Do the same thing for the bingo. Fix that path so that they are directly using what's in the box folder. Okay, so again, all of these pages should, yes, they're all pointing to everything correctly. Now, look what happened. My bingo has Betty, Tom, and registration. Engineering has Betty, Tom, and registration. And registration has Betty, Tom, and registration. The local storage, the browser, saved what we did when the path was what it was. No longer do you see registration, registration 1, and you see what we created when we created it. So now if I add anything else, XYZ, XYZ, roll number 99999, whatever, and make it English, register. Now if I go to engineering and simply hit the refresh, it syncs. What we did in bingo syncs to engineering. And if we refresh registration, it also syncs. So now no matter what you do from whatever page, it's going to sync to the other two pages. For instance, while we're in registration, if I delete Betty Boop here, and then I go to engineering and refresh, Betty Boop leaves. Bingo, refresh, Betty Boop leaves. So now you see a synchronization between these different files because they're not hiding themselves in their own folder. And also because the names of these elements in the web page, they're named the same. So the JavaScript commands are doing the same thing to the same named elements. So basically the lesson of all of this is, depending on what your outcome is, if you want your files to sync or not, if you want something done in one file to change across the board, you will want your paths to cross or not to cross. If you don't want these files' paths to cross, stick them in their own hiding place, their own folder, and make sure, again, that you fix the paths, because right now I messed up the paths again by putting them in their own hiding spot. That means I have to fix that all over again. So for bingo HTML, all right, I have to open them up again. So for bingo, right click, Ev Notepad++, we have to again jump out of the bingo folder and into the box. Jump out of the bingo folder and into the box. Jump out of the bingo folder and into the box. Do the same thing for the other hiding files, the file in engineering. Do the same thing. And do the same thing for the registration folder. Fix the path so that it properly points to what you're trying to access. Now, don't be too shocked to find what happens when we open these up. Let's open up registration. Look at that, registration and registration 2. It's what we saved when the path was this. Go back to CRUD, go into engineering, click that. Look at that. Engineering, engineering 2. Go back to CRUD, go in bingo, double click bingo, voila, bingo, bingo 2. We don't see anything else that was saved in a different path. We now have this, which means now if I enter something in this registration page, as long as this is in its own folder, it won't mess up this one or this one. It'll have nothing to do with it. It will not sync any of the information across the board. Again, there are times where you want the information to sync, and there's other times that you don't want the information to sync. There's probably better code than this. I just happened to notice this as a fluke when Freeman was testing my code, and he happened to do this. This is what got me out of this bandwagon in the first place. I didn't have multiple files. I had one file, and it was called registration. Okay? And he was looking at it, testing how the code worked, and he went over here. He was also noticing the difference between the Firefox browser and the Chrome browser. So while he was testing the difference, he went here, and he's looking at different things, and somehow he right-clicked and saved the page as to desktop. He wanted to see if I could open up information that just had to do with he said engineering. He wanted to see if I could open up stuff exclusive to a specific field. So he hit save, and look what happened. I had an engineering file save with automatically save a folder, and when you open this engineering folder, you see my JavaScript and my CSS files. So it automatically populated what it took to create that website. So when you double click on this, you get the JavaScript and the style sheet. I didn't think that would happen, so I was surprised. And you see what he actually, what was actually saved at that point. So that whole thing, because it automatically created a folder with the special files that I needed inside without me hitting copy and paste, it got me interested in this whole path thing and working with local storage. So yeah, just a little experimenting with files and local storage.